Hi, and thanks for joining us on Live with Squacky. This is season 2, episode 13 already. It's so hard to believe, but I'm so excited about the show and the amazing guests I've had the opportunity to interview so far. Today is no exception. Our special guest today is voice actress Anna Clements. Anna is a Spanish-English bilingual voice actress. She's been in the industry since 2014 and specializes in corporate videos and long-form narration, with a focus on fiction. Anna has been a full-time voice actress for 2.5 years now, and we're so excited to have you on the show today. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you very much for asking me. It's lovely to be here.
So we're so excited, like I said, to have you on the show. Can you tell us about how you got started in the voiceover industry?
Gosh, yes. So I went to a one-day masterclass. A gentleman called Gary Tertzer here in England does a one-day masterclass where you go along to his studios and he basically talks you through all the different genres within voiceover. So a discussion about promos and radio imaging and movie trailers and e-learning and corporate narration and audiobooks, and gives you a chance to have a look at different types of scripts and see perhaps where your voice sits within the market and how you might find your space, your groove within this industry in an attempt to get yourself out there and doing VO for real and for, as a full-time job. So it was a really interesting, I had come from a very different background. I had come from when I was 19, I told my mother I wanted to be a singer, not to be rich and famous, but to use my voice for a living. And she said, "Oh, you have to be really good to do that," which I took to mean that I wasn't good enough. So I studied economics and spent 20 years working in offices, in finance, for other people, and realized at one point that life's a little short. And so I went back to music initially, trained classically as a singer, and then got very involved locally in musical theatre, did a couple of professional productions sort of provincially, and absolutely loved it. And then in late 2014, I met Gary Tertzer for the day and was just hooked, totally thrilled by the whole world of VO. And I've been learning ever since. It's a sort of an ongoing process, isn't it, of discovery and falling in love with things over and over again. So, yeah.
That's so exciting. Oh my gosh, what a great start. And to come from wanting to be a singer and then studying economics, that's such a big, a huge contrast in interest from, kind of the business side of things to, a very artistic profession in voiceover and singing. So that's really great. I'm so happy for you that you were able to get that introduction and get into the industry that way. That's so cool. I'm interested because, and we talked about this a little bit before we started recording, is that your website says Spanish by birth, British by nature, bilingual, so twice as much to say. I love that. So tell us a little bit about your background as far as how you are a Spanish speaker and things like that.
So I am the youngest of 4, and my parents, my father's from Madrid, my mother is from the Canary Islands, and my brothers and sisters were born in Spain, and my mother was pregnant with me when the whole family moved to London. My father took on a new job and a new profession to keep his family of suddenly 6 of us, and I was born in London. And so I was born into a family that only spoke Spanish, but I went to school in London, so I was brought up and educated and watched TV in English, but we all spoke Spanish at home. And then I was very much, I think personalities tend to breed a lot into how you develop as a person, because of my brothers and sisters, I have one brother who refused to speak Spanish at all once he realized that everybody expected him to speak English, whereas my other brother continually spoke Spanish and is married a Spanish, his wife is Spanish and the children are Spanish, and it's been a very interesting to see how the 4 of us have developed and as our lives have gone on. But I was very much I was very excited always by language. My grandparents used to come and visit and stay with us, and they didn't speak any English. So I was the interpreter. I was the person sharing the joke in the other language, whether that was into English or back into Spanish. And fascinated by the different use of words and the fact that both languages have words that aren't translatable. There are sometimes phrases and sayings that mean something very specific, and you can translate the idea or the notion, but it doesn't have the same feel. And so that was fascinating to me, and always has been. And it's been really interesting actually speaking to other bilingual people. It's a very curious way to grow up, because you become very aware of how different people are socially and their expectations, the way they use words, silly things like the British say please and thank you all the time, regardless of whether they mean it. They're always apologizing. You bump into somebody in the street and you say sorry, you know. And the Spanish don't do that at all. It's much more abrupt. There's no please and thank you, but there's no expectation of it, so it's not rude. And that's really curious. I found that really interesting. So yeah, that kind of was an ongoing, and still is an ongoing interest I have in how people use words, how they speak about themselves, how they speak about others, and the words they use and they choose to describe things is really, really fascinating.
Yeah, that's such an interesting background. As you know, I'm also a bilingual voice actor, so French and English for me. But I have a kind of similar story from when I was a kid, in that my grandfather from Italy came to live with us, but my dad's side of the family is from northern Italy, so it was right on the border of France. And so when my grandfather came to live with us, he didn't speak any English, so I only heard Italian when I was little, you know, from my grandfather. And sometimes I knew what he was saying, and a lot of times it was just a lot of this until you figured out what was going on, right? But just developing that ear for language at a small age is so important. And I think, you know, that's something that I always try to encourage my students, since I'm also a French teacher, is that, you know, when these students are studying languages in high school, you know, it's like already way too late. They need to develop their ear for language a lot younger. But it's so interesting, you know, when you have that experience at a younger age, to be able to develop that ear and to be able to use it later in your life. Now, your story is very unique because you know, your family was Spanish and then moving to England to be born. So you were kind of like dually immersed in both languages right from the start, which is really cool. For me, I didn't know until later in my life that my grandfather also spoke French fluently, because he lived right on the border of France. So, so my grandfather also spoke French. And I didn't know that until way later. And it was interesting. It's always interesting to find out later in your life, oh, how come I'm really good at this? Oh, because guess what? Your family actually, northern Italy, which is right on the border of France, and that's why you have that, like, it's like built in, you know. So that's really fun and interesting to kind of discover things like that. But I feel the same as you about the interest in different words and expressions and how they translate or don't, you know, because the same thing applies to French, where you have so many expressions where you can't really, my students all the time will be like, what does this mean? And I'm like, well, it kind of means this, or how do I say that? Well, you can use this expression, which is like twice as long as what you would say in English. And they're like, why is it so long? And I'm like, it just, you know, kind of is just the way it is. So very interesting to hear stories like that. So that's great. What a great start. But I want to dive right into talking about, you've already mentioned who you got started with, but who have you coached with that you would recommend over the years?
Wow. So when I first began, I was very aware that I didn't know enough. I didn't have enough information. I've always been, I'm a lifelong learner, you know, one of those people, like lots of us are, who love learning new things and are constantly fascinated by how much is out there to learn. And there's a great thing on the internet called MOOC. It's the Massive Open Online Courses. All the universities in the world offer online courses that are free. And it's just, you'd literally have to type in MOOC to Google and it comes up. And I suddenly found myself studying sound engineering, vocal production, critical listening with Berkeley Community at Music College in California. And
Oh, wow.
Berkeley, you know, as you know, is fabulous. And they do basically a daily hours video that you listen to, and then you answer questions on, you write an essay, and then it's peer reviewed. So you'll mark 5 other people's homework, somebody else marks yours, and you move on to the next section. And there's sort of all these different modules of different things, and you would be astounded at the amount of stuff you can learn, from, you know, French to zoology, from, you know, vocal production to I don't know, xylophone playing. It's an absolute minefield, and it's a wonderful opportunity, I think, that a lot of people aren't aware of. And so I actually started there mostly because I didn't think I belonged. I didn't think I fitted into this creative world that I'd never been a part of. I was sadly under the impression, as a lot of people are, that if you have talent, somebody will discover you. Somebody will go, oh my God, you're amazing. Well, come and star in my West End musical, because that's how it happens. And I was completely outside of the world of any kind of acting or creativity in any form, and was of the impression that it wasn't a living. You couldn't make a living doing this. It was a hobby. It was something you could play around with, but it wasn't something that would actually bring enough money to pay your bills and give you a good way of life. And so for 20 years, I believed that, because that's my heritage, until I realized that actually I needed to give it a try. And what I've been fascinated by is that there is a basic requirement for talent. We're all talented, but what actually makes the difference is the perseverance, the tenacity, that willingness to go to that next step and learn and find out and keep trying, because you love it, because of the passion behind it. People who I then turned to, people like Nancy Wolfson. I did a course with her. She does commercial VO, does a wonderful job at deconstructing text, explaining why copy is written, how it works, and what you need to be doing with it. So that was a fascinating insight. My other favorite is Sean Pratt. He does mostly non-fiction narration, but actually the stuff he teaches is good for e-learning, for training videos, for most corporate work. And my penchant was for long form narration. And so again, everything he talked about fitted into that world of understanding how to make the text interesting and engaging, so as not to bore these poor people who have to sit for an hour watching your e-learning module or whatever it is. And that again was a fascinating journey into kind of deconstructing the text enough to find out where the important bits were and what the client was trying to get across, making sure that that message actually arrives at the other end, which ultimately is our job, isn't it? Is to make the customer hear what the client wants them to hear. So yeah, it's been but mostly I'm about, but obviously studying is really important. I also study with people like over here in the UK, Yvonne Morley is a speech coach. Nicola Redmond teaches accent work. I'm part of the Voiceover Network, and they obviously have ongoing workshops and stuff here in the UK and in America now too, actually over in LA. So it's about finding out what works for you and about checking. Often I find that it's about personalities. You learn really well with coaches who get you and whose ethos is your ethos. If they're pushing for the same goal that you are, then you're going to stay on board, you're going to do the homework, you're going to work really hard to learn the stuff. Conferences have been great for me, going to networking events, meeting people, actually asking for help, finding out from other people and helping other people. Often in answering questions on online forums and so on, you find out an awful lot about how the system works and where best to go to find the stuff you need. But it's a very personal journey. There's no real one size fits all. I find it's very much, you find the niche that you're excited about, and then you have to go down the road of finding the people who do that and who can guide you on the path you want to go on. So but definitely those people, Nancy Wolfson, Sean Pratt, have been my major sort of inspirations. So yeah.
Great. Yeah, definitely. I know it is. You're right. It's a very personal journey. There's no, like you said, one size fits all kind of a scenario in this industry. It's very much like who you click with. I can't tell you how many coaches I went through when I first started. It was like, yeah, you're really good, but I don't think our personalities click. You know what I mean? Like you find out through discovery. And everybody, I mean, for the most part, every coach I've ever trained with has been great in some capacity. It's just finding the ones that really understand the way that you work and how to, draw out of you what you need to do the type of work you want to do. Like for me, it's animation. I love any kind of type of character work, whether it's talking toys or anything like that. And for me lately, especially, Everett Oliver has been an absolute godsend. I mean, he's just so fantastic. He knows exactly how to connect to his students and how to read them and bring out of them exactly what they need to do to be able to perform the type of work that you're that's going to book you, you know. So that's really exciting to find someone that you work well with, you know, because
Yeah.
I think that's all the difference in how successful you are in such a competitive field. So great. So what are three goals that you have for your voiceover career in 2019?
Wow. I'm again, when I first started, I actually put aside a big amount of money, which I thought was going to be for hardware. And by the time I had actually set up my studio, I started the free courses online because I realized that I didn't know enough to actually use the kit I had. And so I kind of put everything on hold, and then suddenly found I had this nest of money that I was very lucky to be able to afford to spend 2 years going to different conferences, different networking events, again, to find out what worked for me and what didn't. And so what I've been able to do over the last 5 years is actually hone down to the conferences I adore. And I'm desperate this year to go to Johnny Heller runs a long weekend workshop in Rhode Island in October. So that's my next big conference. But I've actually just missed this very week in New York is APAC, which is the Audiobook Publishers Alliance conference. And I've had some issues because of politics within our country with regards to renewing my passport. There was a 12-week delay at the consulate because of paperwork and so many people in Europe being kind of crazy at the moment about where they stand and what's going to happen. And so having not anticipated that, I didn't leave myself enough time to renew my passport. So I'm actually still waiting. My passport has yet to arrive back. I was sort of hoping with my fingers crossed that it might arrive and I could shoot off to New York, but it hasn't got here yet. So that was very frustrating.
I was surprised. I was like, I wonder why she's not at APAC this weekend. Like, oh gosh,
I know.
I figured you had to have some kind of good excuse for not being there. But you're there in spirit. It's fine.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So yeah, May is usually my APAC time, my week in New York, meeting publishers, meeting up with old friends and other audiobook narrators, and checking out different places and all those things. And then October is either Rhode Island one year, and the other year I go to Mavo, obviously. So yeah, it's this year is about hopefully now getting in October back to Johnny's weekend in Rhode Island for narrators, which is a sort of immersive 3 days of just talking about everything to do with audiobooks, which is now my main focus, really. The thing I'm sort of most excited about. So that's nice. The other thing I do a lot of is watching Mark Scott. He's another great reference point. He does a lot of good courses and stuff. And he's very much about setting your goals high enough so that you have to reach for them, because I've been terrible at setting goals that I know I can get to, and then when I get to them I go yeah. So this year I'm doubling my income, which has been really curious, because of course then I had to find out how I was going to make that possible, how I was actually going to go about making sure I couldn't just work twice as many hours a week. So suddenly I had to make my hourly work make more money for me, and work in the right places with the right people, doing the right things, and charging enough money to make sure that I was covered for all of my expenses, and then able to live. So yeah, that's been that probably isn't three, but that's my that's my collection of getting myself to the right places, and ensuring that I'm actually making a living doing this, which now, for the touch wood, for the second year running, I am. So it's great. Yeah, it's working out well.
Amazing. That's so great. I love that goal of doubling your income. I said the other day, I just read this great book about how to basically like how to be a badass and like set your goals and like really just get your life in shape, It's called You're a Badass, How to Stop Doubting Your Greatness and Start Living an Awesome Life. It's by Jen Sincero. And the only reason I'm putting it on here is because it is really amazing. So if you haven't read it, you definitely should. It's, because I think you get to a certain point in your life And I don't know if this happens to everybody. I don't know if it's like midlife crises, whatever, or it's not a crisis necessarily, or maybe it is. I don't know. But I got to a certain point and I was just like, you know what? I have to make some changes because all these people are like, I'm going to make, this much money per year and I'm going to work this hard to get it and I'm going to do this, I'm going to change this, I'm going to surround myself with positive people. And I kind of started that when I started my company in 2014. That was like the ultimate goal of improve your life overall. But then there were kind of like these years of just a mediocre, like, what are you really doing, kind of like floating around and watching all these other people be successful, which is great. Then I found this book and then I started reading it. It's taken me a really long time to read it, only for the fact that I would read like one chapter at a time and then I'd go and do like all this other stuff and like try to apply what I would learn. I just finished it and it's really about, just that, surrounding yourself with positive people, keeping a positive attitude, not letting the negative thoughts and the negative things that happen in the world influence you to the point that you're not accomplishing the things that you want to. And I'm not trying to go off on a tangent here, but a little bit, because I think this is really important, because what you're saying, doubling your income, setting your goals high enough to get to them. If you don't set your goals high enough to get to them, you're not going to get to them. You know what I mean? Like, if you want to make $1 million a year, like, sometimes that sounds like a lofty goal, right? But if that's your goal, then it's like, okay, I'm going to make $1 million a year. Great. How are you going to do it? Like, make a plan. You know what I mean? It's not out of your reach. Anybody can do it. It's just a matter of like having the right steps in your plan to actually get to that. So I think,
very much so. I live by this philosophy, or this idea that we are all underwhelmed by our own abilities. I would often sort of, in the 20 years that I was doing office work, I was singing and I was, on the stage doing different things, but I didn't really believe that it was actually something I could dedicate my life to. And I think it was because when you draw up those lists of pros and cons, there are always good reasons not to do things. Fear always stops you. And I came across a couple of really good sayings. One is, the fear isn't going to go away, so you're going to have to do it afraid. And suddenly that kind of gave me permission to go, oh, okay, so I'm frightened, but what can I actually do? And suddenly you find yourself taking a step, and it's those things about, just the smallest step in the right direction and all those things. And we're terrible at imagining that everybody else has got this box of tricks that we don't possess. They must have either all the luck in the world or the best mentor, or they've been given a book that we don't know about that says, if you follow these 3 steps, you'll get there. And suddenly I realized nobody has the book. Nobody has a box. We're all here and we're all available. And it's about being our own best friend, being our own cheerleader, being our own, self-promotion is really difficult, and it's part and parcel of the job, isn't it? And it isn't, as I said earlier, it isn't just about talent. It's about having the marketing skills and the business know-how and being able to almost separate yourself and sell yourself as an entity, as a product, because what you provide, nobody else provides. We are all very individual, and actually the thing that we have to offer is very singular. And if it happens to coincide with what the client wants, then job done. It's almost as simple as that.
It's just really exactly like you said, there's not a magic potion. There's not a magic book to say this is what you have to do. But if you set those goals and you stick with them, I think, sometimes it's about also saying realistic goals. So maybe you don't start out by saying, okay, I'm going to make $1 million a year and your current salary is maybe 40,000 or whatever, right? So maybe you set a goal that's more realistic to start, like doubling your income. That's a great, start. Or say you make, you want to make 500,000 a year, go for it. Great. Figure out how much you have to make per month to make that happen. What steps are you going to do to make it happen? And the marketing skills are so key. Like you said, Mark Scott is absolutely amazing with getting people to set realistic goals and following the steps to reach them. I think that one thing to have like your list of goals, it's another thing to actually work towards getting them. Because if you just set your list of goals, you put it on your bulletin board, and then you're like, okay, well, someday when I accomplish this, it'll be great. No, like, what are you doing to actually take those steps towards getting it? There's no time to waste. I mean, you don't know how long you have in this life, right? You don't know. Nobody knows how long they have. So you have to, like, stop wasting time and go for it. There's nothing that should hold you back from accomplishing what you dream of doing. And that's exactly what you're doing. So that's great. So that's good. Yeah. So what have some of your biggest successes in the industry been so far?
Oh, that's a very interesting question. I think I've been surprised a couple of times. So I've auditioned for things that I thought were out of my reach and got the job. Those have surprised me. Silly things like you always imagine, everybody always says you have to book a holiday and that's when you'll book the job. And that was my first sort of move into the American commercial market. I'm with ACM Talent in LA, and they finally booked me for a job. I'd been auditioning with them for, I don't know, 6 or 8 months. And I was on holiday in America. And I said, I'm really sorry, I'm not at home. And they were like, oh, that's okay. We'll just book a studio near you. Where are you? I was like, oh, okay. So I took a day out of my holiday and I went along to this studio and I met this guy and I stood there for the day. And that was really exciting, that process of kind of everything just coming together. And sort of all the people, you know, I was in Midwest, there were the people in Boston were on the line, the client was in LA, and everybody kind of came together. And instead of it being a 2-hour session, I ended up being there for 6 hours, and the client approved it there and then. And they made the voice to video there and then, and it went live this year in America. So
That's
that's very, very cool. So yeah, that was very exciting. I was thrilled by that. And little things like last year I was nominated for a SOVAS award. That was very cool. The Society of Voice Arts and Sciences. And I think actually the feeling afraid and doing stuff anyway, you know, turning up for conferences where you know no one. I thought that was going to be a much bigger deal than it actually turned out to be. And I'm always about the anticipation. I anticipate stuff and I try and work out all the things that could go wrong in the hope that way it'll go right. And all I end up doing is scaring myself, going, oh,
Yeah.
you know, I'll miss the plane and then I'll never make it to the conference and nobody will speak to me and it'll all be terrible. And actually the flight takes off and you arrive and you check in and people say hi, and everybody in this industry, pretty much without exception, is so welcoming and so friendly, and so long as you're asking the right questions, so helpful, that really it's not that complicated to actually get out there. And I'm not much of a I'm not a socialite. I don't enjoy big crowds and big parties, and yet I found that actually making connections with people, because that was something else, networking, that word used to freak me out. And when I suddenly changed that word into making friends, I was like, oh, I can do that. I can make friends with people, you know. And so I did. I went out to make friends with people, and actually they've become friends, and you know, we've helped each other through different things. And I forget as well, as I said earlier, that I have stuff to offer. So often people will call me asking about phrases in Spanish or how to pronounce a particular word, and in exchange they help me with some Russian pronunciation, or they know a guy who knows about military stuff, or you know, there's everybody is offering something, and there's a lot of bartering goes on
Right.
within the industry, doesn't it? So
Yeah,
which is lovely. Yeah. So that's been a lovely
I can't tell you how many times I've had people go like, can you just help me with these few French phrases, and then I'll just send them a recording of whatever it is, and I'm like, here, then you have it to listen to as reference. It's what we do. So like hopping into the booth and recording a paragraph or something is no big deal, you know, to send somebody who needs it for their whatever, you know, for an audiobook or whatever, that they have some French phrases in. And I love doing stuff like that. So it's great. How about some obstacles that you've faced over the years since you started?
So I didn't know at the beginning that audiobooks was going to be my thing. So I started, as I said, in corporate narration. My voice kind of sits at that very slightly educational edge to it. So e-learning and corporate training was a very easy fit for me. But I was really excited by audiobooks and by the concept of meeting an author and finding out about their process and how they came about to write their book, and then for me to interpret that and hand it back as an audio. That was, I'm still thrilled by that. But in England, the big publishers are very much still against, in inverted commas, home studios. And so it's very much a case of being in London, walking into the studio, sitting down and recording, which I do a lot of. But what I found was that in America, they were much more prepared to have me send them a sample of my sound and then have me record it from my own studio. And suddenly that helped me break through into a whole new world of income and jobs that I wasn't previously applying for, that I was suddenly available for. Other things have been things like mostly it's about fear of trying new things. So my software, I was using Audacity, which is a free software for voice recording, which is great and works very well. But for long form narration, you need something called Punch and Roll, which tends to be on things like Reaper, Adobe Audition. I use PreSonus Studio One, mostly because the support is so good. So the Facebook group and the people you can turn to, again, it's about asking for help and checking that people who know stuff. It's been a great I had lots of points of reference and people I could go to and go, you know what it's like? You can spend sometimes like 6 hours going, how do I move this file from this place to this place without everything disappearing? And then suddenly you ask someone and they go, oh, press that button. I'm like, really? That was it? And it's just, so frustrating sometimes. And yet actually if you ask for help, somebody knows. So I think I found that having the support for the different pieces of software, that's what helped me choose the ones that I've ended up with. And again, just being happy to kind of Google and search and research so that you can find the best point to jump from. Sorry, I've actually forgotten what the question was. Oh, obstacles. Yeah. So, yeah, my own fear is a great big obstacle. But once I get past it, it's a whole new road.
Absolutely. You have to slap fear in the face and walk right through it. I read that somewhere and I was like, I'm still working on that. I'm great at what you do, obviously, and you've been successful at it for a while now. So what are some of the most valuable pieces of advice that you've received over the years doing voiceover?
Johnny Heller says, say yes and then work out how to do it. And when I first heard him say that, I thought, seriously? I'm going to end up letting people down. I'm not going to know what I'm up to. And actually, it's been the best piece of advice ever. So when opportunity comes your way, grab the opportunity. Ultimately, it's about being ready for when those opportunities show up, so that you do know how to run with it. And I've said yes a couple of times to things I didn't know how to do, but I'd made enough friends in enough places that I could phone them and go, I've actually just said yes to this thing, and now I don't even know where to start, So I think making friends and saying yes, those are my two pieces of advice. Yeah. And there's nothing to stop you doing research. I think I have such a passion for this that even when I'm not working, I'm working. It's as you know, it's not a 9-to-5 Monday to Friday job. Even I pretend to set those hours, but I'm thinking about it all the time. Even with the audiobooks, I'll prep a book and the characters will sit with me, and I'll suddenly 10 o'clock at night, I'll see something that will remind me of a character in a book I'm doing at the moment, and I'll go, oh, I can use that. So it's a constant ongoing thing, isn't it? So I think, yes, it's about saying yes and growing with your passion.
With the characters, I want to kind of branch off on this a little bit here. This was something I was thinking of last night after I wrote these questions, was with your audiobooks and the characters that you have within them. Tell me about that. Tell me about the character development process. You're narrating this story, and what's your process for?
See what you mean. It's okay.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. So I have to read the book from start to finish, because sometimes, in the first couple of chapters, you'll meet this really handsome guy and you'll go, oh, he's obviously the lead, and then he gets killed. and you're like, oh, okay. And the story takes a twist, and at the end it turns out that the guy at the beginning who was the baddie turned out to be the goodie, and lo and behold, he was the love interest. And so you have to read them from start to finish, because you never really know where the author's going with the story.
Right.
So that's really important for starters. And then the information is all there. If it's not in an actual adjective used by the author to describe the person, which it rarely is, it's more to do with, again, the words they use, the way they speak to people, the way they speak about themselves, and the way people react to them, the way people accept them or don't, the way they're thought of. And so it's in all the nuances of other people's opinions of the people. But more often than not, again, it's a Johnny Heller trick. I cast the book. So as I'm reading through it, there'll be a little girl who's usually my niece. There'll be some woman who's either me or my sister. It might be a famous person. George Clooney sometimes in my book. It depends kind of who the people are and what I need from them. I've kind of got a bit of at the moment, I seem to be doing an awful lot of accent work. So I'm currently doing the second in a series of a steampunk series. And he is fantastic at putting in every nationality in the world into his books. And so yesterday, or the day before yesterday, I had a Spaniard and a Russian fighting with each other. And in a minute, when I go in to record after I've spoken to you, I think I've got a Scotsman, an Irishman, and a Chinaman all having a big conversation in this next chapter. And so it's kind of this ongoing... it's a feat in itself, but you make notes, and I have a system that I work. I also did a course with James Foster, who does a course called Fostering Characters, and that's actually about the breakdown of how you work out what to do with all the characters that you come across, which again works fantastically for books, but also works for animation, and even for e-learning and corporate training. It's about stepping into the shoes of somebody else, and how that might be different to the narrator's voice and the depending on the point of view of the book. So there are lots of different sort of tricks and of the trade that you use to be able to step into that person's shoes and become that character. And it's actually the bit I enjoy the most. I think that's why fiction is the bit I'm enjoying at the moment, because there are so many people, so many different characters to step in and out of. It kind of keeps me on my toes. It's, yeah, it's nice.
So if you have, like you said, all these different characters and they're all different nationalities and whatever, is it required for every book that when you're performing that character, are you always definitely changing your voice to reflect that that's the person talking? Or
I do personally, very much so. So often I'll get books actually where they'll say they don't want accents. So we might have a load of Russians and Germans and British people, but they just want English voices. So often the authors will put in a request for specific stuff, but often I've usually got the book off an audition, and the audition is always sample specific. So I'll have done their work in my voice, and they'll know what they're getting. And I love accents, I love voices, but I think it's because I became aware that although there's a lot of work to be done with regards to different accents, how you use your mouth and your face and your tongue to actually create those sounds, but all characters are about personalities. They're not really about, they pronounce different words in particular ways, which makes them specifically German or Russian or Spanish or whatever it is. But ultimately, it's about their personalities. It's about their background, about their soul, their person. And that makes it easy. Suddenly, the fact that they happen to have a German accent is besides the point. The fact that they are shy or have very slim build or a very high voice, or that's more important to me than the fact that they're German or whatever accent they happen to have. So there are lots of things to pull from.
So it becomes more about the acting part of it, and not necessarily always the accent that's going with it to perform the character, just like
very much so. And as you can imagine,
animation where acting where like in animation, a lot of times it's your acting skills that will book you, the joy more so than the voice that you choose to put with it, depending on the character, right? So
Yes,
that's
yeah.
cool.
And as you can imagine, in an audiobook, people want to be able to listen for 8 or 10 hours, and they want to know who's speaking. They want to be able to discern the fact that it's the little girl now who's upset about whatever it is, or because often, particularly in a book, it'll say, there'll be a whole paragraph and then it'll say, said Claire. And you don't know till the end that it was Claire who was talking. So there's no visuals. The animation, you've got the person on the screen and you hear the voice, so it's her speaking. So yeah, all of that has to come into effect, and allow for the listener to know what's going on in the story without going, wait, who's this? So
right. That's so interesting. That's really neat. So we've talked a little bit about your home studio. But let's talk a little bit more about that. What would you say your favorite equipment is, and some useful things that you have in your home studio? We kind of talked about the software, a little bit of what you used when you switched over from Audacity, but is there anything that you use that you love, like microphones and things like that?
Started, again, as I said, I was all about learning. I was all about developing an ear and finding out what all these words meant and what all the technology was about. And so I made friends with a couple of sound engineers, and I would pop down and have coffee with them, and we would chat about nothing, and I'd point at stuff and go, what do you do with that, and what does that do, and how do you and they love discussing kit. If they think you're interested and you're actually asking the right questions,
Right.
they'll tell you all sorts. And I bought an AKG C214 microphone, which is my favorite. It's my best friend. It has served me very well. I have since, when I first started, I bought a Focusrite 2i2, which is a pretty standard first interface, because it's reasonably priced, it works well, it does the job. But I found, after moving house several times over the last couple of years, the USB connection made for a couple of interruptions. And so instead of buying a brand new one, I moved over to Audient. I bought an Audient ID14. Which again works really well with my AKG mic, and I'm really happy with it. I run an iMac, which I already had, so that's been perfect. My favorite thing is possibly my Rode mic arm. I have a PSA1 podcaster. I think if I can move it down and show you. It shifts around. It's my favorite thing, because it means I can sit and stand. I can, depending on what I'm doing, if it's a short commercial piece, or if I'm doing a long form narration, I can change positions. I can hang out in my studio and doing different things. That's probably my favorite piece of kit. That's relatively new, so I'm very happy with that. But that's pretty much it. That's actually pretty much all I've got. I think my software, I use iAnnotate on my iPad. I already had an iPad, so that was handy. And Studio One was the other thing that I purchased when I moved up from Audacity, that made a real difference in my studio. So yeah, but it's pretty basic. Well, I say it's pretty basic. I've got Auralex foam on my walls, and
Right.
and some great monitors. So yeah, no, it's. I think as the years go by, it's a real. That's another conversation you have a lot with other VOs, is about the little bits of kit. Your 770 Pro headphones, or and everybody's got a favorite, haven't they? Everybody has often you'll see on the forums, somebody will say, which headphones should I buy? And people go crazy, or what chair are you sitting on? That's often a question, isn't it? People often ask, like, my back really hurts after a couple of hours in the studio. What chairs are people using? So,
that's funny.
Yeah,
definitely. And I'm getting ready to upgrade my studio, so I try not to talk about it until it's upgraded. But it's okay. But yeah, it's it's all those things, that you just have to do eventually. But you have to get to the right point, and the right point in your the financial aspect of it is always something to think about, and I have tons of foam. I got really creative in my studio with the way that I put it together, because I converted a closet into my studio, so it's kind of small. So I want to upgrade to a bigger walk-in closet area space, and I need to reassess how to configure all of that. So yeah.
The trouble is, it's like being a nerd about kit, isn't it? There is so much to be had, and you could just continually be spending money. So it's a case of, I just recently bought some lights, and they're literally the light strips that you put under cabinets in kitchens. which I didn't
Oh
know
yeah,
came on a roll, and they cost me £12. They are the I think that is the best investment I ever made,
that's so
because
cool.
it's literally on a sticky back strip, LED
Oh,
lights. And they're really bright and they don't give off any heat, which is fantastic. But it's almost like you have to kind of investigate and research it enough and then buy what suits you, because people will give you advice, but actually it might not be the thing that works for you. So you have to kind of spend a couple of years kind of working with it and realizing that there's a little something you just want to tweak and finding out what that thing is and then getting it, or
yeah,
working long enough to earn the money to get it.
right. That's such a great idea about those lights because I can't tell you how many times I have tried. Okay, so like my studio is not like it's not wired for electricity. You know what I mean? So there's no like
Yes,
outlet
mine
in there.
either.
So I have tried so many of those like in the stores here. They have like in Lowe's they have like those. I don't know. It's almost like a flashlight, but it's not. It'll be like a light, and you can like put batteries in, and you turn it on, and you put in there like, great, this is gonna stick. It doesn't stick on the wall. It sticks for like 10 minutes, and it falls off in the middle of your recording. I've
It's like
tried
a
like
workman
three of
light, isn't
those.
it?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I need a better solution, so I'm gonna go check out and see if I can find what you were talking about because that
I'll,
sounds
I'll
like
I'll
such
send you an Amazon link after we've finished.
Okay, cool. Yeah, that's great. Oh my gosh, I'm so excited because I'm like, lights in my studio. How great would that be? I could actually see what I'm doing. People are like, oh, what happened? Your recording sounds so much better. It's because I have lights now. Funny. Like, I'm just here in the dark. It's fine. I don't need light. It's fine. So, what are you working on now that you're allowed to talk about?
So I'm actually in a strange position at the moment because I've actually got 3 books pending. So I'm working at the moment on this second book in the series of this steampunk book, which is so much fun.
Mhm.
It's exhausting but exhilarating at the same time. It's one of those. So I actually enjoy going into the studio for this one, which is great. I've got a Spanish book I had to leave halfway through because the deadline on this one that I just got the script for was sooner. So I'm halfway through a really good Spanish story about the British colonization of southern Spain in recent years, and so there's kind of become a British contingent in all of southern Spain where they all very much stick together. And the story of an ongoing story of sort of a well, it's a little complicated to explain, but I had to stop that book halfway through to start this steampunk book, and then I'm going to go back to that one. And then I've got another book due for the end of June, that I'm really looking forward to. That's with a new author that I met. I've taken to going to author conferences to talk about audiobooks. I suddenly found there was a whole audience of people who were happy to listen to me talk about audiobooks. I'm like, oh, this is so cool. I can just talk and they go, yes.
Yeah,
And I met this lady 3 or 4 weeks ago at an author conference, and she was very excited about audiobooks, and I auditioned for her and she took me on. So yeah, it's nice making connections with people. It's nice sort of meeting new clients, new authors, new people to work with, and every day is different. By the time I've answered emails and sorted stuff out, I may do a book for 4 or 5 days or even 2 weeks, but I'm then moving on to another author, a different genre, a different language perhaps, or different, if it's non-fiction, then it's a really different point of view. It's about being excited about the topic in question, and the I love talking to the author about their motivation to write the book, and then I get to take that
right.
on and run with it. So yeah, it's I've got a lot on at the moment. Thank you. And then I've corporate work that comes in. The corporate work's odd because you can't really, the clients I work with, I can't necessarily count on. So I do a lot of Spanish medical narration, a
Okay.
lot of e-learning for translations from Spanish to English, and that sort of thing. But I never quite know when that's going to come in. So that kind of appears sporadically,
Right.
and I just do those as they come. That's usually a 24 or 48 hour turnaround. So I just fit those in between, which is lovely. So yeah, no, I'm doing very well at the moment. Thank you. I'm very excited about everything.
That's great. That's so great. Do you have any advice for how to kind of reach out to or make connections with e-learning clients. How do you go about the process of doing that, or is it just happen, or does your agent get those?
So I don't. I only have commercial agents, so I have an agent here in the UK and one in the US, but only for commercial stuff.
Okay.
The e-learning I tend to get through clients. Ultimately, Mark Scott does a really good course on who to reach out to, and basically, I think I'm about to move into your next question, which is the one about social media, because it's the connections on LinkedIn, making friends with the right people and actually finding somebody in charge of the e-learning for their particular company in something that you have a strength in. So my Spanish is particularly, not unlike my English, is articulate and clear. And people are often, sometimes the e-learning, they're looking for a conversational voice. They're looking for the guy next door who's just chatting you through, welcome to, working at Toshiba, and we love to have you here. I'm not that voice. I'm the, we need to explain this to you and we're going to test you at the end, so pay attention, I'm that voice.
Right.
So it's, and actually who you then apply to makes a difference, because not all e-learning is the same. So I think, again, it's about honing your craft, finding out where your voice sits, and then literally just applying to people and going, if you're looking for an e-learning voice, it's what I do. Keep me in mind, let me know. And often they'll say, oh, great, yeah, thanks. And sometimes I won't hear from people for 2 or 3 years, and they'll say, you sent us your demo. And I'm like, wow, really? Okay. Because they're not always ready. They haven't necessarily got an e-learning script to go. So it is about making connections with people, keeping them in mind. I send out a Happy September letter because I find Christmas is a particularly intrusive time of year. People are very big on sending Christmas cards, sending presents, but I've always been a September person. That beginning of the school year, I always found very exciting. And so I always send people, it's the beginning of my year. That's when I set my goals. That's when I decide what I'm going to do from September to August of the following year. Just because it works for me. And so I send out messages to people that I might not have been in touch with for a very long time, going, haven't spoken to you since last September, but just reminding you that I'm here, and let me know if you've got anything that needs voicing. And often that's all it takes for people to kind of go, oh yeah, you were the girl who spoke Spanish and we could use that right now. And it's all in the timing. And there's no, Sean Pratt says, it's all about sowing seeds, because you never know where they're going to crop up. You can't quite tell who the clients are who are going to bring you the most jobs. So actually you end up applying anywhere and everywhere, because somebody at some point is going to say yes. It's a numbers game, which is easier said than done. I don't think I've really answered your question, but I think it's because it's about, it's not just about sowing seeds anywhere and everywhere. It is about finding out who you are, how your voice sits within the market, and actually investigating your market. Often you'll get copy in where they'll ask for something, but they'll say they're not really sure what they're after, and they'll know it when they hear it. And you go,
right.
I'm not even sure what that means. So more often than not, I work within the same sort of industry, because medical narrations, e-learnings about training new staff, those sorts of things I've been doing for a couple of years now. And so I know what they're after. And often the way they describe what they're after, they're actually after the complete opposite. So I'll say I'll often give them 2 reads, and I'll go, this is the read that I would have normally given, but actually I think your company is after this. And that's about knowing your market, knowing their customers, knowing the company you're working for. I also work with a couple of agents, in fairness, in Holland and Spain, who, again, it's about the Spanish to English translation. And they'll often phone me and say, or send me an email saying, they've got this work, could I voice this thing? And often they've already chosen me because they know what I'm offering. So it's about being consistent, knowing your own voice. I know where my voice sits. If they just ask me to give an Anna read, I know what that means. And often that'll be off my demo. I'll have a demo mostly that I've actually sent from work I've previously done within my own studio, because then I know I can replicate it and they know that's what I'm offering. So they know what they're going to get, and I know what I'm giving. And that's what's worked for me the most, has really just been consistency across the board, so that I'm always offering the same thing, and people come back.
Yeah, that's great. That's really great advice. Thank you for that. So let's talk about social media now. So which platforms are your favorites, and which ones do you use on a regular basis, and why?
Okay, I used to be a Facebook girl because I have two children, two daughters who are about to turn 21 and 19. And when they turned 13, they both wanted to get on Facebook, and I said only if they were friends with me. So that put them off for a little while. But Facebook's great. It's a great way to keep in touch with friends, family in another country, or friends in Australia, where you send a message and they reply the next day because they're sleeping when you're awake, all those sorts of things. It's great for. But recently, particularly this last year, I guess, with, politics and the way the world's going, and I've just found Facebook a little upsetting, to be honest. And so I realized that it was kind of just dragging me down, and I was having to do things to lift my mood after I'd been on Facebook. And I suddenly went, what am I doing? Why am I even on here? And so I'm not on Facebook very much anymore. I pop on once in a while because there are jobs and things going there, so it's important kind of to still be in touch. But I'm big on Instagram. I use Instagram really as kind of a diary of where I've been and what I've done. People who've meant a lot to me, or who I've enjoyed meeting, or places I've been fascinated by. So it's almost a personal journey on Instagram, but people seem to enjoy it. And again, Jonathan Tilley does a great course on how to use Instagram well, and how to use hashtags, which was a fascinating journey. And Twitter's my favorite. Twitter, I find I've met up with a lot of authors who then contact me, who message me personally. A lot of people who Twitter's kind of, I feel like it's like Facebook's grown-up sister. You can post stuff, and it's much more informative. It's much less emotional. So I'll often repost. If Johnny Heller's doing a commercial workshop in New York, I'll often write, if you're in New York next Tuesday, you need to be doing this. It's informative. There's a lot of information to be had on Twitter. And again, it was about learning how to use it, how to search it, how to find stuff, who to follow, who not to follow. That's been a journey. Yeah, indeed.
Been there, done that. Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yep. And LinkedIn. I'm fascinated at the moment by LinkedIn. That's my new hobby, is finding out how that one works, because I've yet to crack it. I've yet to understand it. So yeah, but Instagram and Twitter are my current favorites. So yeah.
I think I agree with you completely. Everything you just said, I completely agree. Facebook, it's I joke Facebook is dead to me. And people at the last conference I ran, were like, wow, you really hate Facebook right now, don't you? And I'm like, I'm not a fan. I'm just not a fan. And it's exactly everything you just said. It's so political, and there's so much, I don't know, maybe it's just the negativity that's associated with a lot of the posts that people put. And I think you really and truly do have to go through on every social media platform, every little bit. You have to go through and kind of clean it up. Who am I following? Why am I friends with you? Do I even know you in real life? Do we have any real reason why we have to be connected? Right? So with a business, with a company, a voiceover company, it's tricky because on Facebook especially, you're like, do I accept this person or don't I? Who else are my mutual friends? And you have to be really careful as to who you accept, but then you also have to be really careful who you don't accept, because then you're like, maybe I'm not accepting this friend request and it's someone that could, want to come to my conference and want to find out more. So it's tricky, but I hardly ever use Facebook for personal stuff anymore. It's all about voiceover, the business, the show, whatever I'm doing to promote. It's really useful for promoting stuff. If you want to reach a large number of people at one time, you kind of have to keep a thread on that Facebook just for that, if nothing else, And then, like you said, Instagram, I love it. Instagram might be my favorite right now, even though Twitter's like right up there with it. I love both of them, but Instagram is absolutely fascinating. Like just like you said with LinkedIn, which I also haven't totally cracked the code on that yet. I think LinkedIn is great for making business connections and but Instagram is more like figuring out what people are interested in, looking at those insights, which I don't think people necessarily do. Like if you have a business page and you're looking at those insights of who's looking at my stuff and which post is having the most success and what time of day are people looking at things when I'm posting it from, is it really successful at 4 in the morning or is it more successful if I post it at 3 in the afternoon, and it's different for everyone. So you have to really look at those insights because that can be such a key to how successful you are and how many followers you have. And don't buy followers. Like this is just advice for everybody. Like it should be common sense, but I don't think it is to everybody. So, but then like you said on Twitter, I think it's a favorite, because like you said, there's so many people. It's such a great way to reach a large number of people in like a few words, whatever you need to say, whatever message you're trying to get across, with this show and all the episodes that we're doing and like having new guests on. And I started a separate page just for Live with Squacky because I wanted it to be super focused on like, here's what's coming up, as well as my other two. Well, I thought that was going to be a good idea, right? So I have my at me as a voice actor. Then I have Mid-Atlantic Voiceover, another Twitter page. Then I started Live with Squacky, and like now I have 3 Twitters. So now I'm like, okay, this is great. Except now I spend way more time on Twitter because I gotta like update it, like it on that one, like it on that one, post on that one, post on this one. I'm like, oh my gosh, what were you thinking? Like 3 Twitters? Do you really need that? But I really do. It's crazy, but yeah, it's so much fun. I mean, you could spend all your time on social media. You really can't do that. It's not a good idea, but it's a great way. It's a great way to make connections. It's a great way to stay in touch with people that you don't live close to. So yeah, so tell everyone how they can find you on social media so that they can connect.
Oh, well, I'm Anna Clements with one N, so ANA Clements, CLEMENTS, and I'm Anna Clements everywhere. So I'm Anna Clements on LinkedIn, I'm Anna Clements on Twitter, at Anna Clements, and on Instagram. I've also got a website if you want to take a look at me. I'm www.annaclements.co.uk. That's got some samples of my work and stuff, but mostly I'm on social media. Twitter and Instagram are the best places to find me, I think. Thank you.
I'll definitely make sure I put those links in the description below the video. And so let's talk a little bit about the Mid-Atlantic Voiceover Conference because you've been a few times now and it's been such an honor to have you at each event. Can you tell our audience what you liked most about the event in case they might want to register for MAVO 2020, which is taking place on November 6th through 8th in Herndon, Virginia?
Well, they certainly should, is my first piece of advice. They certainly should come along. I went first in 2016, so that was the beginning of my year of going to different conferences and finding out what stuff was about. And I was worried because I was new to the industry and I didn't know what I didn't know. So I was kind of going in blind. And I knew no one at MAVO 2016 when I turned up. And the thing I liked about it is that it's a slightly smaller conference. So there are several conferences where there are 500 or 800 people, and which is a great place to network and meet people and so on. MAVO is smaller. I think we had about 100 attendees at the first conference, and then again last year when I went in 2018. And what it allows for is more communication, more networking, more making friends. I was able to make some very good friends in 2016 who I kept in touch with through social media, who live in America and I live in England. And then in 2018, having not seen them for 2 years, it was like a family reunion. It was just fantastic. And there's just, that's just on the personal side. So, despite all of that, the actual education that's available at Mavo is fantastic. You know, there's so many different breakout sessions and general sessions to help you get to know what the different genres within VO are, and whether you might be interested in them or not. A chance to actually have a go, because there are fewer people, then the breakout sessions have fewer people. And so it's very much more interactive, very much more accessible, much more available to you to be able to try stuff out and talk to people about different things. And the whole thing takes place within that same hotel. So you're having breakfast, lunch and supper over 3 days with the same people. And you get to kind of mix and switch and change with everybody that's there. So it's for value for money, ROI, I should say, return on investment. It's a great place to go, because and particularly for somebody like me, which I think a lot of creatives are, if you're not a natural extrovert, then the exhaustion of being in front of so many hundreds of people, I find really taxing. And so to be able to speak to 8 or 10 people within your breakout group, and then sit at a table for lunch with a different 8 people, you actually get to know people better. And as I said, I've made some really good friends that I've stayed in touch with, you know, to date. Friends who I've, you know, been able to pop out and see, or who've phoned me for help, or, you know, vice versa. And it is such a great industry, because we all offer such individual things that it doesn't really feel like competition. And so it is about having a helping hand, and Mavo feels like that family feel, and everybody coming together and supporting each other and building each other up is very much something I was very happy to be a part of. So really enjoyed both my times there, and hoping to come in 2020. So thank you. If I can get my passport sorted.
Oh yeah, you gotta get the passport. Get that there. Yeah. Thank you so much. That was really nice. It is a great event. I'm really proud of it. I'm proud of the growth that we've seen since 2014, starting out with 28 people at the event in 2014, and then doubling it in 2015, and then 2016, you know, kind of getting up to about, I think we had about 85 in 2016. We went up to we had about 80 in 2016. We went up to about 100 in 2018. We're looking probably to have about 125 to cap it in 2020. So it's been a great journey, and really interesting to see it grow, and we have got some really exciting guest speakers, and our keynote is like, can't talk about it. It's like so epic. I can't even. I'm like, everyone's like, when are you just gonna like tell us? And I'm like, I can't, because it's like it's not time yet, but it's, you know, because it's still kind of far away, but I'm so excited to talk about, you know, who our guest speakers are, who our keynote is. And I didn't think I could top last year, but honestly, it's off the charts crazy. But we're going to do some great stuff. We're going to have like the Friday night, like last year in 2018, we did the Friday night karaoke kind of event. And this time we're going to do something a little bit different, a little bit even more special, and kind of carry it a little bit more through that day. On Friday will be like a little bit more of a complete day. But again, I can't go into complete details because it's all top secret right now, but it's going to be great. So you should definitely think about going to that. So yeah, we would love to have you back. But thanks so much for your time and for your information and everything, Anna. We're so happy for your success, and thank you so much for all the support that you've shown, not only to me, but to my company. And we just wish you the most happiness and success in the future. So thank you.
Likewise, and thank you very much for having me on. It's been wonderful. I was really thrilled, and it's great, and Mavo is great. So I'm more than happy to chat with you, and again, wish you every success. So thank you very much. Thank you.
Thanks so much. Thanks for watching, guys, and make sure that you check out Anna's website and her social media sites, and I'll put the links in the description below this video. Thanks, guys.